Hey everybody, your producer Donnie Turner of the Buying Tampa Bay podcast here, and joined, of course, as always, my two co-hosts. Joined in the office today is Chase Clark.
Hey guys, what's up?
And reporting from his home studio office, Peter Murphy.
Hey, I just want to make sure, I heard the other day that Zillow in their new cloud office doesn't allow remote meetings like this with two people in different locations so as to avoid giving preferential treatment to the guys who are there. So before we start, I want to make sure that y'all aren't going to give preferential treatment only to Chase's voice because he's sitting in the office with you today.
Yeah, we're planning to black you out as soon as we do this intro. So have a nice day.
I knew it. Zillow was right. No Cloud HQ. Cloud HQ only, right?
Hey, this is why maybe you maintain an office, because impromptu meetings like this happen that are unannounced and unplanned.
Yeah, I don't want to be marginalized, right? So, hey, don't marginalize me today. I've got a thing or two that's interesting to say.
I'm sure you do.
Well, let's get into it. So, Hurricane Ian just passed through as we speak today. It's October 5th. So we're a couple of days removed from the episode. Can we get a little bit of an update about, just how the state of Florida was impacted and how our local area of Tampa Bay was impacted?
Yeah, definitely. Tampa Bay really dodged a bullet. 2 days out, we thought we were going to be in the eye of the storm. And just like Charlie in 2004, Ian took a right-hand turn, landed up in Fort Myers Beach, Cape Coral area, Punta Gorda, made its way up through the center of the state through DeSoto County, Arcadia, and then on its way to Orlando and out into the Atlantic again. And so being on the left side of the storm, Tampa Bay really fared fairly well. We had some widespread power outages that lasted a few days, but minimal damage. They're claiming one person here in Hillsborough County lost their life in the storm. I don't know the details on that, but I don't think it was, directly related to any kind of wind or rain necessarily that caused that death, but we'll have to see what they say about that. But again, prayers go out to our friends and their families down in Fort Myers and Lee County, because there's widespread, massive devastation down there.
Yeah, for sure they do. And, we were watching that unfold, and it was horrific to see the kind of storm surges they suffered, and folks who are right, on that eye wall when it came ashore, tremendous loss of property and some loss of life. It's always devastating to hear about that. And we're very prayerful for those people right now. We know several groups of people who are going down to help. We may be involved in some of that ourselves in the days ahead, because there's certainly plenty of work to do. And so we'll probably come back with another update on some of the recovery efforts, Donnie, in some of our future episodes. I hope we will, at least. But, we talked the other day about how tough it is to define Tampa Bay. Because if you define Tampa Bay as some of Polk County, and that's a little bit more east of Tampa proper, that's areas like Lakeland and Winter Haven. And some definitions actually define the Tampa Bay area as that region. Some of those areas got hit with very hard winds. And I've heard stories of entire homes that were lost out in that area too, of Western Lakeland and Winter Haven. We had some water in properties that we manage out there. So really a powerful storm and some impact on properties. But overall, it's remarkable how few of our owners or renters were impacted. Even power outages that were forecasted here for the Tampa Bay area, we had about 250,000 customers affected in Tampa with power outages. But that's a very small fraction of the total amount of customers in our area. So generally speaking, the grid did pretty well. And not everyone was affected, even with power outages over the course of the storm within Tampa Bay. So without a doubt, we were spared some of the worst of the storm's impact. So praise God for that.
Yeah, I'll tell you, for us here in Tampa Bay, and really for everyone throughout the state of Florida, the biggest impact is probably going to come next year and the year after in our insurance premiums.
Oh, sure.
They're stating, I think the last number I heard was around $4 billion in damage down there, just in the center of where the storm hit. Don't know what the total claim number is going to be coming in, but I can guarantee you insurance companies are going to use this as a catalyst to jack everyone's rates up again, being that this is the, I guess really like the third big hurricane we've had here in Florida in the last 10 years that's caused, hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars in damage. We've had a pretty quiet season overall, but you get one big storm like this and it really makes a big difference.
Just offhand, do you think we'll see any changes in the, just like in the construction code? I know that concrete block usually fares very well in hurricanes. Do you think we're going to see some of that?
We saw a lot of that after Andrew, 20 years ago. And I think most of the properties today that were built up to that code from the early 90s are faring very well in these types of storms. Most of the time, the stuff that you see that's just wiped off the map has been, stuff that was built well prior to 1993. So
okay, sure.
I think that's kind of been the benchmark for us here in Florida as far as like wind resistant structures and windows and doors. And I think that code has, stood the test of the last, 20 something years here in Florida.
Yeah, building code, the people who set building codes are always looking at codes and always looking at disasters like this for what systemic failures might have occurred. And I think it's a little too early to know for sure whether or not we see systemic failure in some kind of building standard that needs to be revitalized. The one that always seems to get hit by these kinds of storms is elevation, because, so much of the destruction is because storm surge comes in and it's like 8 feet. And so we don't want living quarters, the actual living quarters of homes to be at that lower level because storm surge can deluge it, inundate it. But if you have parking garages at the lower level, then it causes less property damage. So we might see that bumped up. That's a typical thing to get bumped up in these kinds of scenarios. And that would apply not only to coastal regions, but low-lying inland regions as well. But who knows what kind of systemic failures we'll see coming out of all this. We'll pay lots of attention and try to get back with you as soon as we hear something.
Yeah, one thing too, in regard to that, because you sparked something in my mind. I know someone, or through a connection, I know someone down in Fort Myers Beach that was living in a trailer park. And this trailer park was a quarter mile from the beach. And it had been there since the 50s. And so one thing you could very well see is that the authorities come in and say, well, this cannot be a trailer park again. It's just too close. It's in too high a wind zone. It's in too high of a storm surge zone. It's in an evacuation zone. And we're just not going to allow mobile homes there any longer. How that's going to play out in the courts, with the legal battles with zoning and all that, who knows? But I do know that most old trailer parks in Florida, especially in areas where you don't commonly see them now, are legal non-conforming, which means they can exist until they don't. And there are no more existing trailer parks in that Lee County impact zone where they were sustained a category 3. They are gone. Wow. So that will be something to look for, as far as future zoning and planning in these kinds of areas.
But I was very pleased with how roofs held up. We've seen a lot of remodeled and restructured roofs, and certainly newer construction since Andrew hit in the early 90s. And we had remarkably few leaky roofs and remarkably few drainage issues. And so what we talked about last week, which was significant, and that is maintain what you've got while you have it, while the weather is good and bright and there isn't a hurricane on the horizon. And generally speaking, these the effects of these are slightly mitigated. Storms like these are slightly mitigated. So good work to all of our owners and their tenants, and anyone who owns properties who didn't suffer, because there was certainly a level of your own preparation that likely saved you some direct impact.
We'll be back after a quick break.
You hear a lot about supply chains these days, because if the past couple years have taught us anything, it's that an efficient, well-managed supply chain is absolutely critical to keeping businesses successful and consumers happy. I'm Will Haywood, and I host a podcast called All Business, No Boundaries, where we talk about supply chains, how they work, what happens when they don't, and the innovations that are redefining what's possible in the world of logistics. Listen and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
Yeah, sure. Well, that was a good, thorough analysis. Thank you, guys. Another thing that's been a hot topic besides the hurricane, thank goodness that has pretty much cleared, is what we principally wanted to talk about today, and is what is on top of everyone's minds today, and it's the state of the housing market. It's been a little while since we had this conversation. I know we had this conversation a few times when we first started this podcast, but a lot's changed since 3 months ago when we first started this podcast. I mean, we were all riding the fervor and the high of ever increasing real estate values. Real estate only goes up, and basically free money. People locking in 30-year fixed rate mortgages as low as 2.75%. Who would have ever thought that it's even possible? But it was normal at the time. And then now here we sit, and the average 30-year is over 7%. I think, Chase, you said it was 7.3%.
7.1 today is what Google is showing is the nationwide average for a 30-year fixed conventional loan.
And the way I understand it, that's a 20-year high. And we've entered into this interest rate climate in 4 months. So I like to tell a lot of people this illustration. It was almost like Jerome Powell, the Fed chair, hopped into his red Ferrari, took his girlfriend, aka the economy, into the shotgun, went on the highway and was speeding at 120 miles per hour, and then realized, he's like, oh wait, we're in danger here. We might just crash and come to a full stop. So he slams on the brakes and he's trying to bring it back to 60 miles per hour. So literally double the interest rate, literally is trying to slow us down to 50%. And that would be a shock to anybody's system, I think, to go from 120 miles per hour to immediately 60 miles per hour just by slamming the brakes. And a lot of people I'll just say bluntly, there's a lot of fear in the market right now.
That sounds scary.
It is, I would say. So having said all that, let's talk a little bit about that. Let's talk a little bit about the state of the market.
Yeah, well, Jerome Powell's wild ride. That sounds like a new Universal Studios something.
Theme park.
Yeah, right. I mean, it has. It feels like whiplash, right? I mean, like I've mentioned on this podcast, my friendly bet with our mortgage broker that interest rates would never get, I think we said 6, it wouldn't get into 6s, and here we are, a point higher than what we projected back then. And
6.2 is on the board.
What was on the board?
6.2.
Yeah, okay, so listen, I think it's really important to say this. Chase and I have a lot of experience in the housing market. It's 20 years of experience at this point. And so there's expertise that comes just by living in a market every day and breathing it and working in it. And you have some senses and instincts that really are sharpened by doing that. I'm not an econ PhD, right? I got a master's in econ. So that makes me a couple of rungs less qualified than Jerome Powell and many people at the Fed to comment on much of what we're talking about today from a technical, theoretical standpoint. But I will say that my projections and prognostications were better than many people's as I look to what the future likely held when it came to an interest rate environment. And many people, even some people potentially around the mics today, were laughing at me for my projections that we would be into 6s, and here we are, right? So we're well above that. So, that's the benefit of experience, and it's also the likely disadvantage of what we're getting ready to jump into right now. So we're not PhDs in all of this, but we do have some wonderful real life expertise to bring to the table. And so I'll say that as my disclaimer. Chase, you might have another disclaimer to add.
Yeah, my disclaimer is that Jerome Powell doesn't know anything and that he's doing exactly the wrong thing for this economy. I mean, this is totally a supply issue, not a demand issue. And if you ask people that have my line of thinking, they think raising the interest rates is going to do nothing but spin this economy and this housing market into an unneeded recession. And we're not seeing any prices coming down, if you haven't noticed. I mean, home prices really aren't coming down, as we're going to talk about in a minute. Milk and egg prices are going even higher. Gas prices have marginally dropped, which we know the Fed has no control over. So, Mr. Powell, I'd really like to see what the result of this interest rate spikes is really doing for the American people.
Well, let's challenge that statement, because people are going to challenge it, right? Everywhere you hear right now, you hear home prices are falling, right? And so I'm going to share something that looks like that with you, Chase. And I want to hear why you're saying home prices are not falling, all right? Because here's where we stand. As I analyzed the Hillsborough County, that's Tampa Bay's home sales environment since March. All right, that's the last 6 or so months, right? In March 2022, the median sold price was $410,000. It rose in April to $425,000. It rose again in May to $430,000. It continued to rise through June and July until where the median sold price was $436,500. And then, after all these interest rate hikes were really chugging along, right, we saw a decrease. August, home sale prices fell substantially from a median sold price standpoint to $417,000. And in September, the month just wrapped up, home sale prices for single-family homes in Tampa Bay were $415,000. We're back at March levels at a median sold price comparison. Why is that not decreasing home prices?
All right, so I think one important thing is to define median, right? So median is the favored price. Okay, it's the most popular price of all the sales that occur during a month, versus average price, which is the average or the mean of all the prices for the sales of that month. And so one thing this could suggest is that there's just more lower priced homes selling in the month of August and September versus May, June, July, and what we would normally call the spring and summer rush for housing. And I think some of that, at least in my opinion, could be due to affordability related to interest rates. And so, back in the summer when rates were still around 4%, the average person could afford a $500,000 home. Now that person can only afford a $350,000 home because the same purchase price is costing them an extra $250 a month in payment. So that could be one explanation for it, because we're still seeing a very similar sale price per square foot. The price per square foot has only ticked down maybe 1.5% during that time, while home prices have fallen, maybe 5% if you look at the median from peak to September. So I don't think that we're seeing a decline in value per se, because that price per square foot is holding strong, but we are seeing some challenges to affordability. So cheaper homes may be more prevalent now in sale versus the more expensive stuff.
All right, so the media is going to come on as soon as they get these numbers, which will be soon. They're always kind of a month behind, and they're going to say massive 5% drop over a 3-month period. And it's going to shake everyone up, and we're all going to be convinced that home prices are cratering now since July. And the point that you're making is that if we really look more closely, more fairly at the numbers, we're going to see that smaller homes have sold, right? So while median prices have come down, really what's happened is that home sizes have decreased since July, which is an affordability matter on average. And that's led to that price that's obviously going to be a slightly cheaper home. But the dollar per square foot wise, we haven't seen anywhere close to that level of decline. And that's a big part of what you're saying would likely be the appropriate interpretation of that data.
Yeah, and I would just back that up with this. I would ask everyone out there just to look around your neighborhood. Are you seeing any real deals on homes in your neighborhood right now? Are you seeing homes come up for sale right now in your neighborhood that are similar to yours, that are $30,000, $50,000 below what you saw other homes selling for 2-3 months ago? I would challenge those that live in good neighborhoods that you're probably not seeing deals like that right now.
Yeah.
Danny, I'm sorry. I know that you tried to get a point in there while we were talking, so I didn't mean to talk over you, but please go ahead.
No, hey, if you guys are on a roll, just run with it. This is what I'm here for. This is what I want to hear. Well, yeah.
Well, this is why this is all so important, I think, right? Because we hit this start of this year with this giant projection from Zillow that Tampa would see 22 to 24% increases in home value in 2022. It would be the hottest housing market in the nation, right? And we're not there. I mean, if by every definition, that's not what's happened. So we might not have seen a big decline in prices as we've kind of already looked at, and we'll look at that more. But when Zillow predicted 22% increase in home values, here we are at the start of the fourth quarter of 2022. And what we're seeing from September of last year till September of this year is an increase in home values of only 15%. Right? So
We'll take it. We'll take it.
I know, like
On
that's
this,
3 times what's normal, right?
Well, but tell them, I think in some of the research you were doing, you commented earlier about where did most of that increase come? It hasn't been lately, right?
No, you're right. It's come mainly, it was front loaded in the main part of the year, right? In fact, if we look just since the start of the year to where we are today, prices are only up, let's get back to my data again, about 9%, right? So we saw a big run up and then they've softened, just looking from the start of the year, January through September, but it's still 9%, right? It's not 22. Everyone was hoping on a 22% increase. That didn't happen. By the way, Zillow has also been dramatically wrong in another big bet they made this year, which is their whole iBuying process. And so the fact that Zillow can be off in their numbers, that's not news to anyone right now. However, the housing market is still up dramatically in its value, and we're up 15% year over year from September. So very strong numbers that we have to look at right now.
One thing to remember about this is Zillow made this prediction last November, early December, right, in 2021 about what they saw for the coming 2022 housing market. And at the time, I remember turning on the news at night, and the headline was typically, "Is there a housing bubble?" Yeah. Remember? People were talking about these inflated values of housing and how, these very low interest rates were creating this housing bubble. And so when I was thinking about an outlook for 2022, the psychology of it, after hearing people talk about bubble, was, wow, we'll be lucky if we hold steady in 2022. Then Zillow comes out and says, hey, we think we're getting 20% more. And I was like, wow, that sounds crazy. But then now we're at 15. So I think in perspective, when you look at that broad picture and you take into account the psychological impacts of the media, the rise in interest rates, the threat of recession and all that, I look back at what Zillow said in some ways and think, man, they knew more than I did, or they had a more bullish outlook on the housing market than maybe I did as we started the year. So I think a lot of people thought maybe we were in a bubble and that we were going to see either that bubble burst or we were going to see that bubble be severely restrained in this fiscal year.
Well, I think here's another side of the story that we want to pay attention to, because it's going to affect a lot of thinking, of conversation that we hear in the months ahead. Homes that haven't sold, because you asked the question, what's going on in your community? Are you seeing homes that are like having substantially falling prices? And you're not. But what you are seeing is homes sitting on the market for longer these days, and they're not selling, right? Some homes are not selling. And what is that exactly? So we asked ourselves that question this morning, and we went to look at homes that are still on the market that don't have a contract yet. And here's what we found. And I know this is going to be a little technical, so follow me here, right? Homes that are sitting on the market that haven't sold yet have a median asking price of $479,000. Now, remember what I just said? The median sold price of homes in September is $415,000. So the homes that are sitting on the market unsold are almost 15% higher in asking prices than what has sold. And then let's just moderate that slightly. If we go back to the peak of the market, which was July, median sold prices were $436,000. Let's call it $440,000. What these homes that aren't selling right now are asking is $480,000, $40,000 more, 10% more than even the peak point of the housing market. So really what I think is going on here, and I'd be interested in your perspective too, that we've got a lot of guys who are trying to sell homes for prices that are nowhere nearly connected to the economy and never have been. They're unrealistically pricing their home at almost 20% above today's prices and 10% above peak market prices. And is there any wonder then that they're not selling? They've been languishing on the market for an average days of 50 days on market, these unsold homes, compared to what is selling, which sells at an average of 15 days. So my recommendation is wake up. If you're selling your home for 10 to 20% above asking price, it is not, or excuse me, above market value, it is not going to sell. Unless you have a gold-plated house, it's not going to sell at this outrageously high price. Your realtor priced your home too high, or you asked them to price that home too high. And don't now go and tell us that the market is tanking on you. The market was never where you were. So, what are your thoughts?
Well, if I could speak to that too, I think we just spoke a little bit about how quickly the interest rates have risen. I mean, we had records amounts of refinances in the past couple months before the uptick in interest rates, and with the purchases, et cetera. So what I'm saying is, there's a lot of people that are locked into these 3%, sub 3% mortgages. So the incentives are aligned where they're disincentivized to sell. So these sellers here, they probably, they're making me move sellers. They're like, why would I give up this interest rate? You know what? If you give me 15% or 20% above the market, then I'll sell. Then I'll move. Because they know that if they want to buy again, they're going to be assuming a new loan that's going to be over twice as much. That's why.
Yeah, they're going to be paying 3x the interest rate probably they've got, if not 2x, right? And I like to call this the "where would I go" quotient, right? Like, you already live in Tampa Bay. One interesting analogy we were talking about this run-up in housing prices that occurred over the past 2 years is, we feel like Tampa was an undervalued market. No other market in the United States that has the amenities that we have here in Tampa Bay was selling at $130 a square foot like Tampa Bay was 4 years ago, right? So $200 a square is not outside of the question. $220 a square, right? I mean, we've got similar amenities, other than maybe what some people might say is climate, to the San Franciscos of the world, right? I mean, we've got all the sports teams. We've got better beaches, I gotta say.
Go Bucks.
We've even got access to theme parks in Orlando, much closer than what they have down in LA. And in the San Francisco market, I would imagine that the median home price per square is in the $600 or $700 range, not the $220 range. So I think Tampa Bay has been an undervalued stock that has now become maybe a mid cap, but I think we're on our way to mega cap. And so I don't see prices falling a whole lot here in Tampa. We may have a 2 or 3%, wiggle happen in the top end over the next few months till people figure out where rates are going and what the economy is going to do. But when you factor in things like strong employment, when you factor in things like lifestyle, location, amenities of the area, the overall cost of living, I just don't know where people would want to go. And if they want to go somewhere regionally, let's say you sell in Temple Terrace, for instance, where our office is located. To find something equivalent now, you're moving probably 20 miles north, east, or south of this area to find a home that is equivalent to what you have now as far as affordability goes. So you locked in your home price 10 years ago, 20 years ago, whenever you bought it here in Temple Terrace. To find something equivalent at a similar monthly payment, or where you can have similar equity in the home, you're looking at Dade City, you're looking at Apollo Beach, Ruskin, you're looking at Lakeland, Plant City. I mean, you're not going to find anything in the urban core to replace it that's going to be as affordable or provide you the same kind of equity that you have now.
So I think it's also really important in this whole conversation, because what you're talking about is just like a value proposition for our local market that justifies the prices we have now, right? And it could even justify higher prices. And maybe we're dealing with some kind of a nervousness or an uncertainty in the market driven by a variety of factors here. But will that uncertainty or nervousness lead to the market freezing or values declining? And I think that's the begging question that all my clients have. Everyone who I run into says, where are we going? Is the market going to crash? Is it going to fall off? And so I've had to get a little good at thinking through why market values decline to begin with, and dust off a little bit of those talking points. Because logically speaking, when 15 years ago we were in a scenario where markets were where values of homes were declining rapidly, we were dealing with some market forces that were affecting the housing market that were anomalies and that were substantial. So we were dealing with at that point a massive unaffordability of homes driven by mortgages that accelerated well above people's ability to pay, forced to that point by adjusting rate mortgages. And we were dealing with a bunch of foreclosure activity that banks had taken over and dumped back on the market at low prices because, remember, banks have been bailed out. And so they were no longer needing to maximize sale prices of those homes. Faced with that kind of a market decision, they were able to undercut the prices of homes on the market just to get rid of what they had taken back in foreclosure. And we saw a steady decrease in home values as a result. We are so far from any kind of scenario like that right now that it's very difficult to see what would force downward price trending below ordinary times of the year. And we certainly have seen a very slight price trend down from peak market pricing at the end of the summer. But the point is, home values always peak at the end of the summer. And the slight moderation in home values from summer to now is a reality of the market in most cases. It's not like that's being driven by wide sale foreclosures. That's not being driven by people dumping their homes or trying to short sell their homes. That's being driven by, well, what we're seeing is an affordability problem driven by higher interest rates. And that's an important thing to remember.
Yeah, and I think, we're talking, again, to remind everyone about our local market here in Tampa Bay. There are some unique factors here in this market that make it what it is and insulate it and mitigate some of the national factors that you might be hearing about, in articles and on the news. And so there are some markets that probably are struggling. I saw an article this morning saying that in Miami-Dade County, that up to 25% of the renters in that market are behind on their rent now. And that's interesting. Now, their average rent rates are quite higher than what we have here in Tampa Bay for several reasons. Their home values and their rent rates have always run a little bit higher. But there's a market that might struggle for different reasons, right? And we may see foreclosures tick up down there. We don't know. We're not seeing it yet in a significant way. Donnie, you and I think were chatting earlier about the Phoenix market, right? Yeah. How Phoenix might be having some issues. What are you seeing in that market?
Well, like we said off mic, I don't think right now, as we said, we don't really compare to Miami or San Francisco or any of these A-class cities, but Phoenix, Arizona is a market that I like to compare ourselves to. They've seen a very similar metric of growth ever since post-COVID, similar to what we do. They have very similar desirable factors, so business-friendly, low taxes, favorable weather, etc. And it's also a destination for retirees. So they're very similar to us. And we were talking a little bit about the state of our markets and the median days on market. Now, with the uptick in interest rates, a lot of markets, including Arizona, have suffered on their median days on market. According to Redfin, in September 2022, their median days on market has went from just a few months ago when it was about 18 days. It's gone back up to 40 days. And the way I understand it, that our market is still on a median of 15 days. So just using that metric, you can see that our market, Tampa Bay area specifically, is holding strong despite high interest rates. I mean, the reality is, yeah, go ahead, Peter.
No, I didn't mean to interrupt. I was saying that it's so important in so many of these comparisons to really look closely at the numbers that are being offered up as evidence for whatever market direction people are trying to forecast. Sure. And that's important for what Chase mentioned for the Miami market. So we're major property managers, and we're not reporting anything close to 25% delinquency rates. And the property managers we're connected to are not either. So in the single family rental sector, we're not dealing with the default rates in rents that they're seeing in Miami. So who is exactly reporting that 25% delinquency rate in rentals? What kind of product is it? Were these homes that were already really pushing the envelope from a rent standpoint? Were they condos or apartments that were asking very high market rents that were already unsustainably high, and now they're dealing with some moderation in tenants' ability to pay because they were too high to begin with, right? Similar things go for, like, even as we're looking at a market like Arizona, we're seeing days on market that they're reporting higher days on market. Well, are we looking at days on market for sold homes? Are we looking for days on market for homes that are listed actively unsold? Because that gives us a very different number and possibly a very different interpretation of what's going on in the housing market. We've got to get back to, if it bleeds, it leads. And the economic data is no difference. Everyone wants to report right now how horrible the markets are and how we're just facing the next Armageddon or the next market collapse. And so people are going to extract the worst possible data they can find to paint a picture of demise. And that's something that we've got to really be careful of. I ask all of our listeners here to, when you hear that bad economic data coming out, make sure you're thinking carefully about what's being reported. And is that truly the kind of data that we should be looking at to report on whatever that market condition might be?
Yeah, and to give you a good example of that, so the headline this morning in my business journal was that, up to 25% of renters are behind on their rent. And then that's the headline. And I'm like, whoa, of all the renters, 25% are behind on their rent. But then you dig down in the article and it's like, oh, this is in 9 major metro areas, right? And then you're still like, wow, in these metro areas, 25%, 1 in 4 behind on their rent. And then a quick Google search will show you that in January of 2021, the same kind of article came out and 20% of renters are behind on their rent, a year ago. So, or a year and a half ago. So there's probably always 20% of renters behind on their rent at some point. And it's just the flavor of the day, right? Right now, news is trending negative, right? The stock market's been getting pummeled. Interest rates are going higher. Gas prices are up. War in Ukraine. I mean, there's hardly any good news right now. And so that's what these agencies are thriving on. And that's what the media continues to spin out. But like you said, data is the key. Don't do anything. It's funny because one of the very first rules I remember anyone teaching me in real estate was fall in love with the deal, not the property, right? And that speaks to the emotional versus the logical side of real estate investing. And if you're listening to the news every night, making decisions on what the news is telling you or what you're reading coming across your Twitter feed, that stuff is emotional most of the time. Like, get the real numbers so that you can make a logical decision.
Well, can we speak a little bit from an investor's perspective? Because, we've been talking a lot about, retail, people that want to live in their homes, owner-occs. But from an investor's perspective, I think, and I was complaining about this a couple months ago that there were no deals because the money is so cheap that everybody's buying it all up. Is there going to be an inverse relationship? The market's slowing down a little bit. The money's getting a little bit more expensive. Will there be deals out there? Will people stop gobbling up all the deals?
Well, that's a great question. I had a wonderful conversation with an investment prospect the other day about this exact same thing, and like define deal and define wonderful opportunity and define the time horizon in which you're willing to wait. And what's your comparison point? Real estate versus what? Your equities right now? You think there's better deals to be had there, right? You think there's more certainty to be had in the stock market these days than there is in real estate? So what are you going to do with your money? Put it into cash and have it eroded at a rate of 9% per month or per year as it decreases to inflationary forces? So what if you buy a house right now as an investment property and it's a marginal break-even proposition for you, right? But your home will continue the rate of increase in value at somewhere between 4% and 9% as it had year to date, right? And it has historically done. And your rent rates increase similarly as they historically do over the course of time, right? Provided you have the cash flow to weather any kinds of possible delinquencies or vacancies or maintenance headaches that arise, your return over the course of a 10-year period is a solid 9%. I mean, that's a wonderful investment, even at today's asking prices, at today's rent rates. And that that math doesn't change massively as long as those two factors go up somewhat in tandem, which they do. So are there deals to be had? Well, I think an 8 to 9% return on your money is a fairly good investment decision. It doesn't look exactly like a deal looked 2 years ago or at the bottom of the housing market correction, but it looks like a very solid investment decision.
Yeah, I think some of that, when you're looking at investments now, there's a flight to quality, right? When yields fall, there's definitely a flight to quality. Just like right now, the same thing's happening in the stock market. A lot of people are selling off some of these risky tech stocks, and they're going back to blue chips because the market's got volatility. And when people view the real estate market that way, there's a flight to quality. And so you're going to target homes that are in better neighborhoods, concrete block versus frame, places where there's solid, employment bases of, middle-class workers, maybe, things like that are going to provide not only that appreciation you're talking about every year, but provide stable yield. It may not be like that 8 to 10% that you want, but 4 to 6% of stable yield is pretty good when you tack on the appreciation every year in a market like Tampa Bay, where, like I said, I still think we're a mid cap going to a mega cap. So, we've got lots of upside here.
Without a doubt, you do. And we are seeing a move to quality. One of the things that we've noticed is that there are high levels of inventory in lower income areas in Tampa Bay right now, where people are trying to capitalize on the run up in prices and are trying to exit that kind of inventory because frame construction homes in low income areas with a slightly more volatile tenant demographic is bound to perform a little bit more volatilely, more riskily in a market correction. And so a home in a middle income or middle high income area with a slightly more stable tenant base, with a tenant class that's able to move between jobs a little more fluidly or work remotely in an increasingly remote economy is a more stable option for you. And there's less maintenance required in a concrete block house, and go through the list of what higher quality looks like in a real estate investment. Flight to quality is certainly a main driver of our investment decisions right now. And that's something where we would recommend most of our investors look seriously. Moderate your yield expectations slightly and buy a higher quality asset.
Yeah, we just talked about investors, but part of this market that's very interesting, I think, that we talked a little bit off camera, off mic, was about first-time home buyers and what role they play in the real estate market as far as demand goes and as far as pricing goes. Because the chief issue right now among anyone looking to buy a home is, can I get the kind of home I want for the money I can afford to pay for it? And that all typically boils down to a monthly payment. And so when we look at rents versus home ownership mortgage payments, right, to compare, okay, well, what kind of analysis is a first-time home buyer doing right now that's renting a 3-bed, 2-bath apartment somewhere here in Tampa versus what will it cost them to buy a 3 or 4 bedroom, let's say even new construction home that's similar in features and trim package to what they've got in their luxury 3-bedroom apartment right now. Well, just skimming apartments.com and you look at what rates are right now for, A and B class 3-bed, 2-bath apartments, and they're going in excess of $3,000 a month. The real high-end ones are up to almost $5,000 a month in Soho for a 3-bed, 2-bath apartment. Okay. So I was working with a friend of mine from church, who's buying a house here just in Pinota-Sassa, east of Temple Terrace, and looking at a purchase price of around $420,000, and they could put 5% down, and putting 5% down, their mortgage payment with their HOA, their mortgage insurance, estimated property taxes and insurance escrows and everything, all in $3,100 a month. And so they're buying a 4-bed, 2-bath, brand new block construction home, 1,900 square feet for $420,000. right in line with our median, price per square foot, but it's a brand new home that they can get into for a similar payment to what they'd pay for rent in a newer, luxury style apartment complex. So if you look at it that way, maybe it's a no-brainer, for people that want to get out of an apartment, get into home ownership. If they can do it for the same monthly payment, great. Hey, make the leap, start building equity and stop paying rent, right? But there's not very much of this product out there, right? There's not very much of this 4-bed, 2-bath, under $500,000, home available for people to buy right now, which I think is part of the supply issue that we're dealing with right now still, in the waning, wind down from COVID.
What rate did they lock in?
So here's the thing. They builders right now are offering all kinds of incentives to buy inventory homes because the builders are kind of freaking out a little bit about where the housing demand is going, and kind of, there's not enough buyers and all this kind of thing. But this particular builder only has 2 inventory homes. So It's not like they're sitting on a glut of inventory. But with some of the incentive money that the builder was giving this client, they were able to buy the rate down to 5.75% on a 7-1 ARM. Okay, this is a 7-1 ARM.
Oh,
okay. Now I will tell you, on a 30-year fixed, with the same kind of discounted points, the rate was going to be 6.25. So right now there's about a 0.5 point spread between a 7-1 ARM and a 30-year fixed. And so, you say, well, I don't want to get into an ARM situation, right? But you're locked in for 7 years. Yeah. Okay. So don't worry about the short term if you get an ARM. Likely, if you lock in at 5.75, it's not likely that your rate 7 years from now, when it adjusts, is going to be very much different from that rate.
Yeah. So what would their roof be, do you think? How high?
Oh, the ceiling on the interest rate?
Yeah.
Well, most ARMs, have a 1% per year maximum escalation.
Sure.
But even if we go back to 2002, we were talking about how we're maybe at a 20-year high on 30-year fixed rate. Back in 2002, the 30-year fixed rate was around 7 1/8, right where we're at now. And that was on an FHA, in 2002. So, I don't know, it depends. To me, I think, long-term looking out, maybe it's worth the bargain to go with the lower rate now in the 7-1 ARM, because in 3 or 4 years, if the rates go down again, like Fannie Mae is forecasting 4.5% next year. So if their crystal ball is correct, hey, next year, what are we doing? We're refining.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
We're getting out of 5.75. We're going to 4.5 on a 30-year fixed at that point. Because I'll take 4.5 30-year fixed every day of the week.
Well, I think you just dropped a golden nugget there, because, I've been talking to a couple, younger people that want to experience household formation and get their own house. And I was explaining to them, I was like, you're maybe 4 months off. Because 3-4 months ago, we were in a weird situation, just where it was cheaper. It was cheaper to buy a house and own than it was to rent.
Sure.
That's something that would be considered maybe even an unhealthy market. Like, that doesn't make any sense. But that was something that you could do. And I was telling them, I was like, maybe that ship has sailed a little bit. Maybe, just get another 1-year lease and wait out this storm and see what you could get later on. But that creative financing and talking about new builds with the 7-1 ARM, that was gold. I like that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, you made a good point too, Donnie. It doesn't make economic sense for it to be cheaper to buy a home than to rent a home, right? For most people, that should be a more costly scenario for them. There's an increase in a quality of life often, the ownership mentality, investment building that happens when you buy a home. All of that should come at a premium in cost, right? Because there's certainly a premium of growth opportunity that accretes to the person who buys a home versus someone who rents forever, right? So rentals should be some percentage less in cost than that purchase price. I don't know what that percentage is. My sense is that should be about 20% less, because you're talking about a substantial benefit that accretes to the person who owns a home versus rents. The market should always reflect that kind of differential. So just in that basis alone, I think we've got a long way to go from a ceiling standpoint. But let's not forget that product has just not come into equilibrium. Builders have not built out. We're hearing lots of reports of all this extra inventory that builders have. There's not a lot of this extra inventory out there, right? And, there's not like you can go into any community and buy whatever you want at any time. You've got to wait certain periods of time. And certainly in our market, that's the reality. And it's not like you can go and buy whatever kind of house you want that's an existing build, right? Like Chase already mentioned, many of the more desirable communities around our area have nothing available for sale in them, right? So that means that if a desirable home comes on the market, from an economic standpoint, it should come on the market at a relatively high price because it's very scarce supply and there is demand for it in the right neighborhoods. So let's get through whatever turmoil and fear factor is roiling the market right now. Let's get through this Jerome Powell's wild ride, which was where this all started. And I think what will come out on just a few months from now and maybe in the start of 2023 is clear-headedness, right? Strong demand for wonderful product in one of the best states in the union should make for a very solid future for Florida's housing market. I'm as bullish about it as I've ever been. And I have enough experience now to have weathered a few of these storms and seen where the opportunity has, not supported my bullishness. This is not where we are today.
Well, could we do this as we wrap up? Could we go around the table and maybe give our bear and bull cases in that order? And if you don't mind, I'd like to start. I think where I stand on my bear case, worst case scenario is, what we've been talking about, dancing around this whole conversation is what I would say is stagnation. So, I was talking a little bit off mic about the demographic cliff that we're facing and the two major demographic cohorts that are in play here with the baby boomers, 65 to 79, retiring. They're called the silver tsunami. They're the largest cohort. And then the second largest cohort being the millennials, 25 to 30 around my age. And, according to the Motley Fool, we see that the average net worth of a baby boomer is 1.1 million, while the average net worth of a millennial is about 76,000. Now that tells you those numbers there tell you a terrific story. And the reality is that the baby boomers are sitting on a ton of equity because they own all the real estate. And the millennials, maybe because of high student debt, et cetera, they haven't, or, the reluctance to buy, they haven't bought, so they have no equity. So we have this huge distortion, this huge separation in net worth. And if the stagnation in the market continues and the baby boomers are reluctant to sell and free up that inventory that should be getting freed up organically because they want to downsize or whatever, and they're disincentivized to do that because they're locked in on their low rates, the millennials are going to be locked out of the housing market. And this might be a phenomenon that we're still going to see for the next 10, 20 years. That is my worst case possible scenario. Now, on the flip side of that, my bull case is hopefully we see the supply chain loosen up a little bit. We see the gears get greased a little bit, and these new builds start ramping up, right? And we start seeing new inventory. And even if we don't have the organic sales from the baby boomers and this transition, that maybe the millennials get fine housing stock, and especially in areas that still have room for growth, like our own home of Tampa Bay.
Yeah, that's interesting, and I guess I would offer up this for your bear scenario with these millennials being locked out of the market is that, let's say the net worth on average is $76,000. This buy scenario of this new construction home that I proposed, if there's a millennial out there or a millennial couple that's just been married and you've been able to save up $25,000 or $30,000 and you're paying $2,500, $3,500 a month in rent right now for a really nice apartment in the urban core, you can afford to buy this home. This 4-bed, 2-bath, 1,900 square foot block construction in a nice HOA community right near I-75 and other good transportation corridors to get you where you need to go, right? So you can make that transition. It's just a matter of, do you have the down payment funds? Probably you're going to be doing a lateral move on your monthly budget. You're not going to see a significant increase in what you're paying now for rent, unless you're living very frugally. Maybe you're living in a 1-bedroom apartment and you're only paying, $1,500 to $1,800 a month in rent. Now you're looking at taking on another $1,000 to $1,200 a month in an obligation. but also realize that extra obligation of $1,000 to $1,200, half of that is going toward paying down the principal and building equity in your home.
Mm-hmm.
It's not an expense every month. So there is a little bit of light out there, even in your bear scenario, at least in this market right now. But to your point, we need more inventory. We need more of this kind of product available for those millennials to buy. And if I was a builder right now, I'd be building to beat the band, right?
Sure.
I mean, number one, these builders are sitting on lots. They've got high interest rates now ticking up on their lines of credit for their inventory lots, and they need to get these homes out of the ground so that we can preach this message further to millennials that are renting, I think. So I think, for me at least, I got two takeaways from this. Bear market, I guess, for investors is going to be more like a waiting game, right? It's like, as an investor, I can't get what I've been accustomed to, right? I can't buy a house for $100,000 that after I put some lipstick on it, it's going to be worth $300,000, right?
Sure.
Like I did 5-10 years ago, right? So I'm dissatisfied because I can't get what I used to get, right? But on the bull side for investors, I think the mindset needs to change a little bit, because what better place to put your money? Are you going to put in the stock market? Can you even figure out what that thing's going to do from week to week? Or are you going to put it in a stable cash flowing asset, even if your yield is in the 4 to 5 to 6% range, but you're building equity and gaining appreciation in a market like Tampa? So there's the downside and the upside for investors. And I think for buyers, look, you can buy stuff where your payment is equivalent to your rent if you've been wise with your money and saved up a little bit for a down payment.
I love it, guys. You guys, listen, I am extremely optimistic on our nation, on our economy, and on people in general. I believe that our best days are ahead of us. They always have been. When you look at a macro level, micro level, you can see periods of time where you have downs and rises. But as a people, as a country, our best days still lie ahead of us. Populations are not shrinking in Florida. They are going up. Innovation is not decreasing. And I'm not just talking about like tech innovation. I'm talking about financial product innovation. I'm talking about employers and businesses innovating to create new streams of income so that home wealth grows. Household wealth will continue to grow into the future. It always has in the past. So I'm not convinced that that's going to be a different picture into the future from here. And prices for fixed goods never fall over the course of time. They always go up. And prices for land never falls over a long period of time. It always goes up. And there aren't sustained examples of that in desirable areas like ours, or over much needed goods and services like what people need in the state of Florida to live and thrive. I believe our best days are still ahead of us, and I'm not going to buy in, and I don't think anyone should, into the constant drumbeat of negativity from the prognosticators, because it just is almost never true. All of their projections of demise do not come true. But so here's what I project. My bear market projection is a 3% home price appreciation per annum starting this year. We're going to see a solid 3 after this whole Zillow correction thing comes through. By the way, we'll finish out 2022 somewhat in the 10% price increase year over year. And subsequent to that, if there is a flat line, it's going to be about 3% on the home price appreciation index and 1% on the rent rate appreciation index. Prices are going up, and they're not going to stop. Rent prices are going up because I'm an investor and an owner of this product. I'm not planning on dropping rents, right? Nobody who's a capitalist is. So they're going up 1. That's my bear scenario. My bull scenario, a 10% annualized home price appreciation rate in Florida, coupled with a 5% annualizing rent rate appreciation rate in Florida. And those prices will go up at that level consistently until we reach the value of all other major U.S. housing markets. And we're well away from those values still. So that's my scenario. Florida, especially, is a strong investment decision. And I bet I'm going to be right in this.
I love it. One last thing I'll add too. If you're sitting out there right now thinking, man, these interest rates are so high, I'm going to wait for them to come down. Just remember, as you wait, prices are going up. And so you got to consider, should you buy now, take advantage of the price appreciation, with the ability to refi, because I believe Fannie's correct. I believe we will see rates down again. They will not stay at 7%. They won't stay at 6%. We're going to see them back in the 5s or the high 4s at some point in 2023. So don't wait for that, though, because by the time the rates fall, the prices are going to go way back up again. And then the other thing is, don't sit around and wait for the bubble to burst, because I think one thing you should have learned from us around this table with our local expertise over 20 years is that there will not be another 2008. It's not coming. You're not going to see a 30% decline in home prices. So don't sit around and wait for that, because you'll be waiting forever and your rent is going up. So just be cognizant of what's going on in the market. There's always, it's always time to buy. You know, that's the message today. I think if you are in the market to buy, you should buy.
That's very true. It is always time to buy. And let's couple that with, it's not always time to sell, right? And that's how you avoid making bad decisions. And guys, that logic applies to the stock market too, right? We make the same decision. Buy what you have confidence and believe in, but just don't sell when the market's low, right? That's obvious. And with housing, there's enough time required to sell that should be a massive deterrent to you making a knee-jerk reaction on that. By the way, on what you said about the Fed expectations or a Fannie and Freddie expectations, Chase, I sense they've got some good inside information to help them believe firmly, or to know without a doubt that that's where rates are going to be. Let's not pretend that the Fed chair and the Fed doesn't talk to Fannie and Freddie about where things need to be for the economy to thrive. They're probably the closestly connected people in the financial services sector right now, and they're not projecting something that isn't actually going to happen.
Yeah, they buy all the paper. So
yeah, right.
People
kind of control it, right?
At the end of the mortgage day, they know what they're talking about.
Not a hard projection for them to make, I don't think, right?
Yep.
So
that's right.
That would be nice. Get another 4.5. That'd be nice.
Yeah, it would. Yeah. Refi City all over again for everybody that's buying right now. But hey, it's great.
Yeah. It lubricates the market, guys.
Well, guys, I know I got a lot of value just talking through and thinking through everything that's going on in the market today. Like I said, it's been top of mind for so many people, and this affects people's lives. I mean, let's just be honest here. So I think this was a very profitable discussion. I got a lot out of it, and I'm sure the listeners will as well. So thank you, guys.
Yep, definitely.
You're welcome. Y'all have a good
everybody.
day.
Producer Donnie Turner here with the Buying Tampa Bay podcast. Thank you again for tuning in today. It was a very timely episode. I want to apologize a little bit about the audio issues on this pod. It's a working experiment, this show. So really appreciate your patience with that. And if you are an active investor and you are interested in the Tampa Bay area or already investing in the Tampa Bay area, consider HomeProp for your management and investment needs. We have plenty of agents here with wealth of experience that could help you either manage your existing property or help you source new property. So check us out. Website is HomeProp, HomeProp.com.